Hi there. Welcome to Apple World. I truly do recollect the entryways going from like open to shut, all the changing area entryways like if there was strain. And I realized that you realize I was a youngster, and I realized that they offered me this genuinely terrible arrangement in the third season to I consider sort set me straight, so I said no. You removed my profession of 30-something years. You just went excessively far. So it seems as though like the show between Will Smith and his new ruler of ire. Co-star Janet Hubert isn't over, all things considered, and Tatyana Ali, as of late, spilled some new tea on exactly the way that awful Will was to Janet and disrupted her vocation. Janet has been exceptionally candid about the manner in which Will abused her, and she freely called him an egomaniac in spite of the fact that Will apologized to Janet in 2020 during an episode of Red Casual Conversation. We're currently hearing that this conciliatory sentiment might have recently been a PR trick, and that will involve the circumstance to advance himself in his significant other's show. And presently Tatyana Ali, who played Will's cousin Ashley Banks on New Ruler, is standing up on this present circumstance, and she uncovered exactly how seriously Janet Hubert was treated by Will. Yet did Tatyana really witness Will Janet, and was Will's expression of remorse to Janet simply a PR stunt? We should get into it. I heard when Janet said that I know that others have expressed that about her. I've seen that in web-based entertainment, however. I didn't realize that she felt as such. It's a well-known fact that Janet Hubert, the first, and Vivian from the notorious 90s sitcom, The New Ruler of Bel-Air, had a dreadful and profoundly plugged fight with Will Smith for very nearly 30 years, and keeping in mind that it would be guaranteed the quarrel was over after he was sorry. To Janet in 2020, it seems to be there's more going on than might be immediately obvious, and supposedly Will, his significant other Jada, actually can't stand Janet on the grounds that she openly uncovered their egotistical way of behaving. So to give you some setting, Janet Hubert played subterranean insect Viv for the initial 3 times of New Ruler. Yet when Season 4 debuted in September 1993, fans were stunned to see that Janet had been supplanted by Dabney Maxwell Reid. No great reason was given at the time other than bits of gossip about the supposed imaginative contrasts. However, at that point, the circumstances took a monstrous turn when Will began pummeling Janet openly, and he essentially sent off this hypothesis that Janet's enormous inner self is the reason she was terminated in 1993. He went on an Atlanta public broadcast and guaranteed that Janet needed to be the primary star. I can express directly up that Janet Hubert believed the show should be the insect Viv of Bel-Air show. Will said she's frantic now. Yet she's been distraught from the start, yet as Janet later let Will know when he at long last apologized in 2020, marking somebody as frantic and troublesome in Hollywood, particularly a person of color, is a kiss of death. What's much more wrecked is that Janet wasn't being very hard, and Will made up this story on the grounds that Janet seriously hated his hazardous hum. Or Janet later uncovered that she went with the choice to leave the show after the makers definitely decreased her job and offered her an embarrassing arrangement with only 10 weeks of work, and furthermore, told her she was unable to work elsewhere and would commit no error. This video is for you straightforwardly. I won't go to my grave inclination that questions have been unanswered or misguided judgments of me that you put there have never been managed. No place that did at any point say I was terminated. The main individual who at any point said that Darlene was you, the regurgitation that you heaved, I actually unleashed of it. Obviously, it was outside the realm of possibilities for Janet to get by on 10 weeks of work with next to no side hustles. At the time, she was the provider in her family and accommodated her infant child and her now ex James Whitten, who was likewise oppressive, so she had no real option except to turn down the proposition that I gave her. Janet later said this was the makers' approach to taking care of her, and they essentially put her in a position to leave so they could blame everything on her mentality. Yet how could they do that when the crowd loved Janet as Auntie Viv? Well, you got it. Will was the issue from the beginning, and he was the one whose self-image cost Janet her vocation. Clearly, Will was so loaded with himself that it irritated him when Janet didn't giggle at his in the middle between takes. Will needed to have the focus on him consistently, so between scenes he would tell wisecracks with the crowd and others on set. Janet, anyway, a Juilliard-prepared entertainer who's likewise 12 years more established than will, like to zero in on her work, rehearsing her lines and getting ready for the following scene. Anyway, the greater issue was that Will's jokes were colorist, and Janet just couldn't remain there and giggle freely taunting dark-skinned ladies. She told Dark America Web in 2010, I was a dark-skinned African-American mother, and Will used to make the "you're so dark" quips to the crowd before the show, and at one point I emerged and halted him. He didn't have any idea how staggeringly rude that was to ladies like me, yet Will thought about this literally and began sassy ang Janet, and obviously the makers agreed with his position since they couldn't risk losing him as the superstar. In the meantime, Will likewise managed to turn different individuals from the new ruler cast against Janet. In 2009, Alfonso Riro, who played Carlton Banks, dissed Janet during his stand-up show, telling the crowd the was insane. Not long after, Will shared a photograph of what he called a new ruler get-together without Janet as the first Anut VV when TMZ requested that Janet remark on this set. He said he's as yet an egomaniac and has not adult. This steady gathering thing won't ever occur in the course of my life, except if there is a conciliatory sentiment, which he doesn't have a clue about the word yet. Janet didn't simply have words for Will, she likewise later came for his significant other Jada when she attempted to mobilize dark entertainers to blacklist the 2016 Oscars. The selections were delivered a couple of days before Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and Jada utilized this chance to call it the foundation grants, recommending that ethnic minorities ought to blacklist the Oscars on the grounds that the institute has neglected to perceive their creative achievements anyway. Various industry figures, including Chris Rock and Janet, asserted the genuine explanation Jada and Will were boycotting the Oscars was on the grounds that Will wasn't designated for the film blackout. Janet then, at that point, posted the video getting down on Jada for being tightened up. Sweetheart, there's a great deal of happening on the planet that all of you don't appear to perceive. Individuals are kicking the bucket. Our young men are being shot left and right. Individuals are ravenous. Individuals are starving. Individuals are attempting to take care of bills. And you're discussing a few entertainers and Oscars. Janet likewise hammered Will and Jada for being frauds, bringing up that they profited from a similar framework. They were requesting that others blacklist them, and she likewise uncovered Will for his absence of fortitude on the new principles. I vaguely recall at Choice Opportunity approaching you and saying, "You understand what Will you're the superstar for? For what reason don't we all social gathering and with you, perhaps we could receive a little pay increase, perhaps the organization, since you realize the show is such a hit, and you being the superstar, your impact will assist us with extraordinarily loving they did on companions like white shows." Truly do recall that. Do you recollect that "'cause I do H" and your reaction to me was "my arrangement is my arrangement, and you bargain is a bargain"? At the time, Will remained quiet on Janet's remarks, yet quick. Forward to 2020, and he unexpectedly concluded the time had come to apologize anyway. Many individuals felt the timing was dubious, and they hypothesized Will was simply causing harm control for Jada. Later, the entire ensnarement circumstance, in addition to me, made himself seem to be the hero for coordinating another new sovereign get-together this time. With Janet and Will had a conversation on a unique episode of Red Casual Conversation, and Janet uncovered exactly how gravely she endured in light of Will's activities. "We lost our home. I lost everything, notoriety, everything. You removed all that from me. With your words, you realize words can kill you. Realize those words, calling a person of color troublesome in Hollywood, is the kiss of death." Someone crushed a treat in my child's face and said, "Your mom is individual. Send me scornful Instagrams. Aren't you dead yet?" I love Will. Why not simply bite the dust? Will then, at that point, apologized and guaranteed he didn't know better since he was youthful and didn't have a clue about the force of his words. It was all excessively far on my end, yet a ton of fans felt Will's expression of remorse didn't appear to be earnest, and they brought up that he spent very nearly 30 years freely gaslighting Janet and afterward utilized her agony. What's more, enduring to sell another new sovereign gathering. The most horrendously terrible part is that nobody agreed with Janet's position during this entire time, and every one of the cast individuals either kept quiet or upheld Will's story about Janet being troublesome anyway. Tatyana Ali is currently at long last standing up on this, and in a new meeting, she uncovered that even as a youngster,